Wherever you are in the world, welcome to another edition of Jerry's Take on China. If I can paraphrase Anthony Blinken here, whatever Ambassador Liu Xiaoye said in France does not change the status quo on China's position vis-à-vis the Balkan states. What's really interesting is that Ambassador Liu did not say he thinks Ukraine is not a sovereign state. He specifically said it is a European country. He also said some issues depend on perspective. And here's an interesting perspective. Russia doesn't agree, at least Putin doesn't. It's all explained in a link attached here. It's a question of both linguistics and anthropology. Those of us who are of a certain age will remember when we all used to call Ukraine the Ukraine. Well, the simple reason for that was the region of Ukraine was part of a greater region we knew as the Soviet Union. And as far as many Russians are concerned, it's still referred to as such. Putting it linguistically, there are two ways to refer to a place in Russian. One is na and the other is v. So when Putin mentions Ukraine, listen carefully. If he recognizes the sovereign borders of Ukraine as a country, he will say Vukrania. But he doesn't. What he says is Nakrania, meaning he recognizes it as a territory. Sorry about my pronunciation if it's bad. It's a little like we in English might use the definite article, the. We don't use an article for a specific place unless it's part of the name. I can go to the UK, but I can't go to the England. I might go to England and while there visit the English countryside, referring to a region within a bordered country. So for a Ukrainian, this is very important. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has made a statement on the matter, and it has said, and this is why I paraphrase the US statements on Taiwan, that it respects the sovereign status of all the former Soviet republics. So clearly, nothing has changed since last week. That's the status quo. China isn't changing its stance, nor is the Chinese ambassador to France. He's just making it clear that not everyone adopts the same view. When Putin's translators and Western media relay Putin's speeches to us, they translate his words as Ukraine, while what he actually says, if it's translated correctly, is the Ukraine. It's been an interesting discussion, and it's clear that the comment has been taken right out of context. One aspect I find interesting was quoted in the French newspaper Le Monde from a Ukrainian presidential aide, Mikhailo Podolyak. It was that the status of ex-Soviet countries was enshrined in international law, which after exhaustive searches, I can find no reference to any international law enshrining Ukraine other than the law of precedent, meaning it is this way because it's always been recognized as so. Let's put that into context. When South Sudan became a country, there was a referendum there, a vote and a formal acceptance into the UN as the 193rd country. Palestine, the 194th, is not formally recognized. For further context, let's consider the fact that according to Wikipedia, when the UN was founded, Ukraine and the other Soviet republics did not exist as countries. The Ukraine, as it was then, and Belarus both joined the UN as founder members, but didn't gain independence until 1991 when they became countries. Ukraine was still known as the Ukraine until 1993 when it formally asked for a change to reflect its sovereignty as opposed to a territorial status. In order to further demonstrate the nature of the comment being taken out of context, the entire 49-minute interview needs to be viewed. But in the 11th minute, Liu says quite clearly, and even my schoolboy French is good enough to pick this up, Ukraine is a European country. He never at any stage of the interview questioned Ukraine's sovereignty. He merely pointed out what is historically correct. None of these countries, which used to be part of the Soviet Union, have received a formal recognition, even though they are all recognized as sovereign countries. That's a really telling point. The issue with what Ambassador Liu said was also in reference to the Crimea, where we still use the. It's never been recognized as a country by the UN. It was clearly, historically, a Russian territory. It was historically fought over in the mid-19th century in what we Brits know as the Crimean War. Go look it up if you don't know about that. He also went on to say, it's not necessary to quibble about this. It's important to stop the war, which almost everyone in the world should agree with, unless they have financial or political reasons not to. Let's remember, this comment was made by a Chinese person using French to discuss a legal and technical situation. And it's clear, if we watch from the 15th minute, that he was struggling to relay correctly what he meant. If any of his critics try to accurately describe this process in Chinese, they might understand his difficulty. The difference is the process. Ukraine and Belarus were not countries when they joined in 1945, but became countries in 1991. Sudan had a referendum and a UN acceptance process. The process for Ukraine and Belarus was one of precedent. At no stage did Ambassador Liu suggest they weren't countries. He merely suggested that some people might view it differently. Clearly, Putin does. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Global Times, and every other Chinese media states the same thing. The former Soviet countries are all recognized by China as sovereign states, and nothing has changed. The Chinese ambassador to France merely reiterates that and concedes that some people, presumably he means Russians, view the pathway to peace differently. And if we're honest, the pathway to peace is always viewed differently by opposing sides. So thank you once again for watching Jerry's Take on China, and I hope that clarifies one little point. With just a little research, we can find how context really does matter. Please like, share, and subscribe. Thanks once again for watching. See you next time.